Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Rudy El-Khoury, Dean of the School of Architecture. So this is our second year of the spring term salons, and this is the third session in this season. And the spring term salons are meant to showcase the research activities at the school and the university. And this season was devoted to the School of Architecture labs, but also, and this is the program this evening, to U-Link. This is the flagship research funding program at the university, which has been extremely successful in fueling interdisciplinary research. And tonight we have the mastermind behind this program, Dr. Erin Kobitz, Vice Provost of Research and Scholarship, and she's the holder of a Senior Endowed Chair in Cancer Research. And she will tell you more about U-Link. And we have the panelists here who have all participated in this program, and a demonstration of the interdisciplinary reach, actually, of this program. Well, I'm going to give the mic to Erin. Oh, you have yours. And please come closer.
Can you hear me? Oh, yes. Good evening, everyone. It's really a privilege to be here at the salon. I feel like I'm Dorothy Parker, sort of. I don't know if anyone understands that joke. So in my role as Vice Provost for Research, Scholarship, and Creative Endeavors, I have the extraordinary opportunity to support this program called U-Link. I'm not really the mastermind behind it. It was created before I became Vice Provost, but I get to support it. And U-Link is incredibly relevant because it asks faculty and graduate students from different disciplines to come together and to try to solve for complex social problems. And when we think about social problems like climate change or race and anti-Black racism or COVID, it really requires people working outside of their disciplinary boundaries to come up with solutions that none of them would have ever anticipated or even conceptualized on their own. And so I'm really pleased to be here tonight with my colleagues who I believe are some of the best representation of the work that U-Link supports and why it's important to work across these disciplinary boundaries to accomplish big things that have true impact. So I'm going to turn it over to them for them to share a little bit about their U-Link projects, what it's focused on, what they do. Then I might ask some questions because I'm always looking to improve. And then we're going to open the conversation to all of you because I'm certain as you hear them speak that you might have questions and ideas that ultimately may inform how the program itself moves forward. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Chao, who's going to give an introduction, and then we'll move down the line.
Thank you, Erin. So we've all been asked to just speak a little bit about ourselves and how we got to the U-Link program. And so I'll start by saying I'm the Associate Dean for Research here at the School of Architecture and the co-director of the new Masters of Professional Science in Urban Sustainability and Resilience that the School of Architecture works with the Department of Engineering and the College of Arts and Sciences on. And before working on the two U-Link projects that I've had the privilege of being involved with, I had an opportunity to work with Landolf, sitting all the way at the other end. He'll introduce himself in a bit, on an NSF grant. And we did a lot of pro bono work as well, related to preservation and resilience, and on another occasion in creating housing for post-hurricane populations. So we've had a long trajectory, had a lot of other types of projects in between there, lots of charrettes and good work and coursework that we've done together as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about our U-Link experience in just a minute.
Thank you, Sonia. Good evening. I'm Esber Andiroglu. I'm Associate Professor of Practice in the Department of Civil Architectural Engineering. I also hold a secondary appointment at School of Architecture. I taught here for a number of years. And, I come also with number of years of industry practice, especially in relation to built environment. So one of the courses I teach, it's called Sustainable Construction, which is one of the core courses in a Master of Science in Construction Management program that I'm the director for at College of Engineering. And in that course, we always try to bring innovation emerging from research for deployment into practice. And when doing that, though, often interdisciplinary interactions with researchers and faculty becomes an essential tool or the link. And that wasn't always there. It was challenging. So when U-Link was first created, it kind of provided me that opportunity, and I had a number of PhD students who were the students of my colleagues in my class the prior semester. And you know, some of the topics we discussed, which ranged from sites to wastewater treatment to energy resources, transformed an idea of what can we do with wastewater, for example. Can we use it for building buildings or use for construction? And so we started thinking about it, and the advisor of my student got intrigued. That's Dr. Pranoy Suranani. And we said, let's go for the next U-Link call on this topic. And what can we do with wastewater? So we said, oh, perhaps we can do not buildings because it's icky, there's organic matter, but can we maybe promote creation of biophilic concrete or cement that promotes life from organic matter? And can we consider using this concept in coastal structures like defense systems, seawalls? And right about, so we launched and we were successful in receiving that grant. And then we, of course, had to get that interdisciplinary element put together. And, you know, it was challenging, but we started thinking, what do we need? Who do we need in the mix? So we're doing marine environment. We needed a marine biologist. Neither one of us had the expertise there. And we were thinking design forums. Yes, I have secondary appointment here, but I'm not an architect. And it happened that Joel here, my colleague, was joining UM, or had recently joined, and I was part of his search committee, and I had seen his work, which was very unique shape forms, and I thought, wow, like, you know, Joel could do miracles probably in this arena. So he's great. Let's approach him. And the most unique member I'm going to mention, we had economists, we had marine economists, and then we had a sculptor artist who said, what am I going to do with you guys, bunch of scientists and economists? I create sculptures and make political statement with sculptures. Said, well, who better can communicate our mission? So, and in the end, really, she was instrumental in establishing communication. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel.
Thank you. So Joel Lamere, Director of the Graduate Programs in Architecture here, an assistant professor as well. Esber already alluded to like what I was going to say. So obviously this, this question of interdisciplinarity is built into the problem of solving big problems, right? Like, it's very easy for all of us to get very like focused on that kind of like very specific kind of research within the realm that we are interested in. But as soon as we want to spread beyond like the kind of disciplinary boundaries and solve problems that like matter to the world, then it's obvious that you need a kind of expertise beyond what you have, right? And so in a way, everything that I've been doing has always been kind of like, maybe had tendrils out there for possible interdisciplinary collaboration, but that makes it all sound much more intentional. So these two have both given you stories of like how clearly important interdisciplinary work was for them to seek out. But I will admit that my interaction with U-Link was much more accidental, and Esber alluded to this already, which is that he was part of the search committee that brought me here 4.5 years ago, right? And so I actually I remember very specifically after I gave a lecture or my job talk that was about, flat sheet materials and how you can pleat them and form them to produce structure, that you came up at the end and started talking to me even then about seawalls, right? Or about how that kind of structure might be productive for protection of land and sea, right? And this was like before U-Link was an apple in your eye even, right? Like it was just like not even there yet, right? And so it was really interesting that like kind of accidentally, once I accepted the position and I came here, some few months into my appointment, Esber approached me and asked me to join this team. And it speaks to, I think, the real benefit of U-Link, which was that it demands interdisciplinary interaction that we wouldn't necessarily do naturally on our own, right? And so Esber also alluded to this, of like the actual cast of characters that were involved in this U-Link thing was really broad, right? And so, yeah, it was 2 engineers, 1 architectural designer, 2 economists, 1 artist, 1 librarian or data librarian, right, and 1 marine biologist, right? Incredible breadth of characters, right, to be pulled together for something that without the kind of seed funding that U-Link provides, you wouldn't ever even have the alibi to pursue, right? Like it would be impossible to imagine that group of people would have come together and been like, from nowhere, been like, all right, we're gonna invest the next year thinking about how we're gonna apply for this grant or that grant, or how we're gonna be like collaborating on a project. And so U-Link really was, like the only reason. I mean, I think Esber and I would have connected anyway about things, right? Like because we had natural affinities. But without that, I never would have met these economists with whom I'm still working and talking occasionally, right? And like the U-Link is like, that is it. Like for me, it's like a platform that just like demands and gives just enough space for those kinds of interactions to happen. Now, I will just say as a kind of major caveat to what's happening tonight is that I feel like unfortunately we're misrepresenting the degree of interdisciplinarity that U-Link has, because like we happen to have 2 engineers and then 2 like architectural research characters here, when we were supposed to also have an economist and like an artist and like all that stuff. So just to be clear, like the groups were much bigger and much more engaged from a kind of interdisciplinary perspective than you see right now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Landolf. I'm an engineer, and I'm in the Civil and Architecture department with secondary at the School of Architecture. I teach some of you, and some of you I already met, and with a secondary also appointment in Ocean Sciences. I consider myself a U-Link child. I might be the individual that has profited more than anybody else on this institution from U-Link, and for me, U-Link represents basically the formalization and the evaluation of interdisciplinary research. And I think this is critical. And it goes beyond creating teams. It goes trying to solve complex problems. It goes into a career path, because right now in everything we do, we have to talk with different stakeholders. We have to go beyond our disciplines and boundaries. So breaking those silos and go beyond what we call our discipline is critical. There's another dimension to U-Link, which is basically the interaction and the ideas that transfer with the students. So a lot of you have benefited maybe from these interactions. But there is also a challenge, because, I mean, as much as we love each other, and they invited us because we were the coolest ones, but Joel doesn't want to say that. But there is a challenge in learning each other's language, in learning to collaborate with others. And I mean, as engineers, we're not the easiest ones to work with. And you have to understand and learn not only the individual, but also the discipline and how they work and how we work. And I know words that I would never use before, like cross-pollination, which comes from Sonia, if you even. And this interaction actually, I argue, that made me a better designer. It certainly made me a better researcher and a better individual. So again, like I give kudos to our institution, our leadership, and this goes way beyond of what we think as U-Link. And our teams, I've been in 4 teams now, so I've benefited a lot. Hope that's not a problem. But it brings back a lot value to the university, not only in external funds, but also in the way we address education and how it goes beyond to our local stakeholders and so on. So Thank you.
So despite being the mastermind of U-Link, I actually hadn't heard any of them give witness and testimony to why U-Link was so important in their career development and also passion for the work, so that's amazing. I was hoping that maybe you could comment a little bit on the specific projects in which you've been involved. And you're right, given who's sitting on this panel, I believe that the U-Link calls that they're going to speak to are probably more narrow than the breadth of the U-Link program in and of itself. But you will have an appreciation for how we leverage interdisciplinarity to dream really big about possibilities that lie outside the scope of what any of us can accomplish on our own or through one discipline. And then maybe we can open it to some conversation that will give you further insight and the opportunity for introspection about how U-Link has changed all of us as faculty and as professionals, because it gives us that appreciation of how other people see the world, which allows us to be better at our own science and scholarship. So, Sonia.
So I think that interdisciplinary collaboration is actually part of the DNA of the School of Architecture, and it has been for probably as long as I've been around. So working in that way was very easy because of that heritage that the school has been so sort of ingrained in. And so when U-Link came about and I had an opportunity to become part of the second phase of the project that Landolf had been a part of the first phase, and then we got to collaborate together on that second phase, it was during the call for climate. And here was a team of a lot of marine scientists of all types. Two of them were coral reef specialists. One of them was a sort of seagrass specialist. The other one is the person in charge of that incredible surge tank and the sustain tank. We had someone from communications who was helping us to kind of engage with the city of Miami Beach and to engage with some of its citizens. And the project in the first year was looking at trying to figure out how through engineering and collaborations with these marine scientists, they could come up with an enhanced reef. And I'll let Landolf talk to you more about that because his sea hive has really sort of exploded and become quite a wonderful tool for coastal communities. But when I was brought on board, the idea was, well, so what? So we know how to do this. We think we know how to do this. We're going to test this out in the bay, off the ocean, off of the Miami Beach coast, in collaboration with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which was another incredible experience, right? Working with our partners at the Office of Resilience and Sustainability and others within the city of Miami Beach. But then they said, well, how does that impact people and buildings on the land side? And that's where I came in. And thanks to the fact that when he and I had worked on an NSF grant, I was able to create a new model, thanks to my partner Benjamin Gansa and I, collaborating together and having wonderful conversations with Landolf, who was always sort of prodding us on to figure these things out. But it was an opportunity for us to say, well, we can actually now quantify with precision at the level of parcels how buildings and people are in fact more or less vulnerable. And to do that was a big deal because that meant that we had moved the dial from what FEMA does right now, which is to look at these topics, through zones and floodplain sort of data. So that was when I was brought on board, and our work had to wait all the way towards the end of the project when they had gotten all of their data back. And so we had to kind of had that big push right towards the end so that we could get all of that data and modify the model so that we could see how these three different scenarios could actually effectively make people more or less vulnerable. And we really understood how, in fact, thanks to the Sea Hive, it made a very big difference in terms of how it kept people safer on the land side. And more recently, I've been, thanks to that project, I now co-lead another U-Link project, which is focused on expanding the sort of data sets that we can pull in that include ocean science, sort of ocean current information, for example, water temperature, bay salinity levels. We also look at the infrastructure on land to understand what their sheds of influence are and how they reduce, vulnerabilities. And so this new U-Link that I'm involved with now currently has really been an offspring of that wonderful experience where I learned so much from not just the engineers, but those marine scientists in particular. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Can maybe Landolf go and talk a little bit about Sea Hive since you've referenced it? I think it would provide some context for how your work extended what he was trying to accomplish.
So what I want to say about this is that it's very critical that while we're working on a specific aspect of those projects, we create those connections and how that actually goes all the way to what we call community. And for us, it started so at that point there was phase 1, phase 2, and it was 2 marine biologists, a coastal engineer, and myself. We started to talk about coral restoration and the implications that it has to do with shoreline protection. We quantified some of these effects in the lab. You see the effects in the sustained tank, and you see that there is potential. But the biggest question that arises is how can we use coral restoration when the corals grow so slow and protect? So the question mark that comes is how can we enhance it? And the enhancement comes not only from the green part, not only from selecting the right type of corals, create more resilient corals, fast growing and so on, but also it comes from the artificial structures that we're using. So that is where I came in, and we had those ideas, including the Sea Hive as a technology that developed. And it provided us, again, U-Link provided us a platform where we can intercept and actually create those pilots. And actually we have one which goes very recently in the water, 2 recent. So the idea here is that it's not only about our research and the project itself, but it grew into something a lot larger. So Sonia's work allows us to make the connection with the community. And I think that at the end, we should not forget that connection. It's not about only the natural environment. It's not only about the built environment. And who lives on the natural and built environment is about us. It's about the community. And that link with the stakeholders and how we communicate those messages, ask an engineer to talk to the communicate messages. I don't know if it's the right thing to do. But if you learn how to communicate, how to measure those effects is critical. It makes our work better. It makes the communication better. It makes the argument of what we can do better. So I think that the success is actually there.
And I just wanted to add one thing, because I think another exciting thing about the projects are the external partners that you can bring in. So for example, on this occasion, we had partners that were involved with the Nature Conservancy, and they had just so much very specific know-how and data sets that it made our work, it expedited, the whole process for us. And it was a wonderful experience to work with them as well as the city.
And not to focus on this project only, but this project was at the core of what we have now as the DARPA X Reefs, which is basically a big project from the Department of Defense on hybrid coral reefs. So that seed funding and the ideas that started at that point allow us to be ready for a larger call, and I would say a larger cause also.
So U-Link is very much intended to be seed money that allows groups of faculty to generate the preliminary data necessary to be competitive for large grants. And most federal funding agencies, as well as foundations, don't want to fund single investigators anymore. They want to fund people who are working together in this very fashion, because their goal is not just to generate new knowledge. It's to take that knowledge and apply it so that there's measurable impact that changes lives. And so with that, I want Esber to talk a little bit about his project, because it was very much oriented around that possibility of change.
Yes, and it really also ties into their project, Seahive Community, because when we started exploring the seawalls, we said from the beginning, we got to do this in a community. So we said, where can we explore that's tangible? So during the first 6 months or 4 months of our project, we actually had a rental van, and we started touring as a team all around South Florida, all the way from South Dade up to Fort Pierce area, Palm Beach or Stewart area, exploring coastal regions and seawall topologies and how they impacted the communities. And at the end of that, we assessed what we found in our visits and explorations, and we did realize that seawalls, for a lot of people, is expressed as erosion systems, erosion prevention systems, a separation between land and sea. But indeed, they really had a lot more function. So they contributed quite a bit to ecological health. They controlled stormwater runoff. They impacted the views or access people have in communities for social interaction with water and various activities. So the meaning of a seawall varied quite a bit. We deployed a survey and asked questions to people, and the responses we received varied quite a bit. So at the end of it all, we decided on a community, North Bay Village, who agreed to join us as a partner, community partner, which truly became a first for us to have a real participating community partner as a member in our team, and said, use us as a living laboratory for your project exploration, because we are trying to bring innovation and sea level rise solutions to our community, but we have a lot of issues. We have pollution issues, we have water quality issues, we have property value issues, and so you're talking about all of that. And community all of a sudden had a new meaning for us. So as we started developing solutions or investigating solutions, we also started looking at, for example, Landolf and Sonia's work and seeing what Seahive was doing, and we said, why can't we plug in Seahive into our project as one of the solution options? So all of a sudden we had two U-Link teams kind of interacting and merging in certain aspects. Now, I want to bring up something else that's really important, I think, that this U-Link exercise and research investigations, for me at least, really changed the teaching and learning pedagogy understanding among our students. Those of you, the students, we all learn differently, and typically as faculty, we all teach differently, but we're not necessarily always aligned with your learning styles. When we were in our research teams that were interdisciplinary, we weren't even able to communicate with one another at times. We had some serious challenges. So we really had to overcome those challenges, but as we did, we related to you better. We used you as context for communicating with our colleagues that were strangers. So from the education side, for me, it really transformed our approach to education and teaching and learning styles. And now, our first project continued for 3 years, and now I'm on part of a different team, which is a project inspired by Surfside Building Collapse. And in that project, we have two of us who are veterans of U-Link, and we have other members who are first-time members. And we have some of those communication challenges again, but we're able to navigate through them a lot better now, because at least we understand the challenges better. We understand their perspective better. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joel.
Great. Couple things. So first off, Landolf, you're absolutely right. We invited the cool people here. You're one of the cool people. Thank you for coming. I think that I want to launch a little bit off of this, the proposition that U-Link was obviously made for, or catering to the idea that sort of national funding, larger funding agencies are interested in problem solving as opposed to sort of pure knowledge production, sort of preliminary research as a kind of like enterprise, right? And then I want to piggyback that thought with what Esber has just described as like the difficulty of communication that happens at the beginning of U-Link project, because I think that there's something very rich that happens in the space there, right? Which is to say, you know, obviously every discipline has a kind of associated epistemology, right? Like we all have a way of like knowing things. We like describe the world in certain kinds of terms, right? And so there's a degree to which a U-Link project is helpful because we all then, all of the people around the table who have these different epistemologies have to like come to some sort of like Venn diagram common understanding that allows us then to like apply for research that is problem solving kind of research. But I would actually advocate also for those moments of contestation and maybe disagreement as also being on their own productive. Those places that are not about resolution at all, maybe they're more dialectical in this way, right? Like that they work by virtue of the conflict between things. And so I would say that like, I think Esber described some of like the work that we were doing very well. But I think that like when those epistemologies come into conflict, you produce things that aren't really about solutions at all, that aren't about resolution at all, but are about like much more interesting speculative ideas, right? And so what I loved about our U-Link project is that, yes, we published a paper which was retrospectively looking at various seawalls, judging them very scientifically for what they had accomplished and produced, but at the same time, you know, we were spinning off ideas at various scales. So like the work that I am continuing to do with it are much more speculative ideas about like 3D printed concrete that might be 5 or 10 or 15 years down the line, right? Like so they don't all resolve as like one set of proposals, right? Like that actually the conflict itself is super productive, right? And so you have from this same set of characters, yeah, you have some things which are very much about a kind of like contemporaneous like problem solving, maybe directly ready for a grant proposal kind of thing. And then you have some stuff which is, you know, much more speculative, and some stuff which even like ends in the world of, in terms of epistemologies, ends in the worlds of cultural critique and in like future projection and fictions, right? And that's what like our artist brings to the table as a kind of as a discipline which is productive, right? And so I would advocate for U-Link as a thing which might respond to this kind of like the general state of affairs about funding, right? But I was much more excited about those things that were not about that at all, but producing kind of like conflict and speculation, right? And so me and one of the economists on the team are like almost unrelated to U-Link, but peripherally related insofar as it's about conflict, working on a potential paper about the use of concrete in China over the last 10 years, right? Like totally unrelated to seawalls, and emerged much more from the kind of peripheral conversations and conflict that we were having, rather than the kind of resolution that was coming around the table. And so for me, that's the more interesting part of U-Link. Not necessarily the most productive, but the more interesting.
I agree. As somebody who grew up trained from an interdisciplinary orientation, I believe that conflict and the uncomfortableness that sometimes comes from that conflict is where we grow individually and collectively. So thank you for bringing that point to our attention. I'm getting eyes from our organizer that it might be time for us to open up the conversation to those of you from the audience who may also have questions beyond the ones that I've kind of asked about U-Link. And if you don't, that's also okay. I have other things I can say.
Yes, I know. I talk a lot. I asked a lot. I know. I saw it. But the reason that I'm asking is actually because right now in our integrated studio project, we're doing a project concerning about in the Miami River, and of course we're looking at sea level rise and all of that, of course. And I actually came out with an article of your project that I'm actually going to implement in my design project. And I actually that is I when I first read it, I thought that it was very very interesting, very innovative. I liked a lot the idea of using concrete not only as a wall and as something that is not going to benefit the environment at all, but it's also going to benefit the marine biology that is in there. And also we also had to study like before that Miami had mangroves all over the coast, so bringing them back, it was a good idea. And I actually liked a lot about your project, and I wanted to learn more about it. One tiny question. Um, the um, the the roots of the mangroves are going to get intertwined in the design of the hive, right? Are going to unravel, right? And it's supposed to that the mangroves are supposed to rise when the sea level rise. Also, is it going to make it sink, or it's going to float with the mangroves?
So if you're referring to the project we're showing there, basically the idea is that the mangroves do not really require a lot of sediment to live, and they live at this intertidal zone. So the idea that we have, and this is a pilot, it should be in the water in the coming weeks also. The idea here is provide the mangroves the platform for them to grow. And of course, they're going to interwind and they're going to create their own ecosystem there. And when I first I saw that image that Daniela, who is hiding behind, created, and she's one of you. When I saw the image, I was surprised, and I was like, what? These roots there? I like order, but in reality, what we are seeing there, and to a certain extent, what we will see, the complexity of this, is the reality in the ecosystem that will be created. So once this happens, the mangroves potentially can climb up and continue. So whenever we create those hybrids, our idea is that we create a seed for the future, because now it's a hard surface. So by putting something there, and the multifunctional surfaces that my colleagues here have been proposing provide also that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to Dagmar. Thank you, first of all, for being the kind of person who asks questions. That's really important. So remain that kind of character. I think that the point that I was going to make was just an extension of something that I already said, which is that in addition to the different characters bringing different epistemologies and different methodologies and different ways of working and different versions of what science is, et cetera, there's also an ideological component here, right? Like, one of the things that I found so nice about this particular group of people that we had at the table was that they also they also prioritize different stakeholders differently, right? And so it was by that nature. The idea of the kind of the multifunctional wall is almost just embedded in the interdisciplinary structure of the team, right? Like, you couldn't have a wall which was only solving one kind of problem when you had people who had different ideological stakes in it at the table. You had to address everybody there. And so you don't come, this is maybe one of the problems with the Corps of Engineers version of solving problems is it's engineers. So it's a very particular set of characters and only those characters. And now they're becoming obviously much more outreach associated with it. But I think that it is the U-Link structure and the idea of interdisciplinarity, which I think birthed the multifunctional seawall as an idea, right? That was is like completely entwined with the set of characters that we had at the table.
Just really quickly, from a design perspective, if you weren't using something like Sea Hive and you had a seawall behind you, that would of course block the capacity of that mangrove to start to creep higher up as the sea levels rise, because we know that they'll start to migrate inland as those sea levels continue to rise. So the wonderful thing about Sea Hive is that in fact you can lock in another piece to it, and then there's another layer that it can continue to grow, right? So keep that in mind whenever you are thinking about these types of interventions, that mangroves do rely on having only a certain amount of wet feet, and so plan for that one way or the other.
Other questions from the audience?
I have a question.
Okay.
To Aaron, actually, that at one point there was a discussion of U-Link having a physical home. Like, in addition to the administrative offices, I think there was a discussion of a lounge, like a bar where the faculty, students, etc., could meet and to provoke perhaps what Joel was talking about, those peripheral conversations that actually would lead to other things. Is that still in the cards?
I hope. I mean, I believe very much in the power of space and needing physical space to invite people to come together for conversation and collaboration. As you know, budgets are always a challenge. And so time and again, even though prioritized in my request, it's not something that's been realized. Now, Esber can attest. So when I became the Vice Provost for Research, this is another exercise in interdisciplinarity, I was like a CEO of a merger and acquisition where there were all of these different units, administrative units across the organization who had reported up to different leaders who now were going to report to me. And I was going to have to try to accomplish a shared culture that was focused on faculty centricity, customer service, and reducing burden so we and you can focus on work. And so my team was also scattered across the university. Some were at the Rosenstiel School, some were here on this campus, some were at medical, and then some were in Gables 1, which is that big white building that's next to the Bagel Emporium strip mall, which is very nice if you like bagels. So I was like, well, people need to be together. Like, how do you build a culture of like a culture of belonging if people don't have the opportunity to sit down next to each other and strike up a conversation that says, I work in compliance, you work in research administration, how do we support faculty? So we actually took over the space in Gables 1 and built what I'm hoping will ultimately be the template for a larger sort of U-Link inspired space. And Esber can tell you, because it is available to anybody who wants to use it, it's all open space. There are offices around the perimeter that aren't assigned to anybody. You can borrow them at your leisure. You can use the space to facilitate different types of conversations. There's booths, there's tables, there's breakout sessions. And I'm hoping that more and more faculty and students want to hop over where parking is free to take advantage of this, because it does really facilitate the possibility of working across boundaries, because the space is organized in such a way where the boundaries that traditionally inform how offices and researchers work no longer exist. So I hope, yes, let's manifest it. It's important, and if we really want to be an institution that provides not just interdisciplinary funding and interdisciplinary classes, but the opportunity for interdisciplinary dialogue, discussion, and debate, we need to have a place where that can happen.
Thank you.
I will actually add that Aaron was very kind enough to invite us there recently, because last weekend we had an interdisciplinary, a very large scale NSF-funded Sea Level Rise Solutions grant workshop that we hosted here in Coral Gables, and we asked Erin if we could use that space for the workshop. And so that's when she invited us, and we toured the place. She was, it's beautiful. It really offers a lot of amenities, a lot of flexibility. Unfortunately, it didn't end up working for us because at the end, I guess our workshop was successful enough that we had a really large turnout. So we were 70, 80 people, and we weren't going to be able to comfortably have a large group meeting there. But yeah, it's a great space.
Okay. I'm told we have to stop because we exceeded the allocated time, unless there is a question, one more question. Okay.
Hello, I just wanted to ask, through this project, the particular project that is displayed here on the screen, what were the most prominent challenges, I would say, that you guys faced? The whole research that was done, what were the most prominent challenges that?
So if you're referring to the one that was on there just before when you started to speak, that was when Landolf and I were working together on that coral reef study. And I think that the major hurdle, at least I'll speak for myself, was, as Landolf said earlier, trying to understand each other's language. And I sometimes felt like I was going to class, which was wonderful. It was great to sort of listen to my colleagues and learn about marine sciences in ways that I never thought I would as an architect, and to continue conversations with my colleagues who are engineers, things that I needed to understand in order to be able to kind of be effective myself. And so we would go up to the the third floor in the library, and have our meetings up there. And they were kind of round table presentations to make each other more familiar with our work. We shared journaled papers that also facilitated that process. But the challenges, of course, are how you communicate and how you figure out the proper timeline so that everyone that's on the team can actually have an effective role and one that they feel is valuable, right? So that's from an administration position, which I'm kind of doing right now with the second group. We're trying to always figure out how do we better connect all of the different members of the team to that process so that they're always engaged in meaningful ways. And last thing I'd like to say is I encourage students to really think about how you too can be more and more involved in research, whether it's a U-Link grant or other faculty-led research initiatives. I just want to encourage you to continue to try to pursue those whenever you have conversations with Nicole about your opportunities for research assistantships, to really think very seriously about how you too can expand your breadth of knowledge by joining one of these research initiatives.
So with that, we're going to conclude this evening, and I want to thank all of you for the incredible work that you do. I feel lucky that I've gained a child this evening in Landolf, the first U-Link baby. And I think that there is an opportunity for us to expand these salons and to really expose the broader university community to the power of interdisciplinarity, as well as some of the important discomfort that leads to change. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. We hope the conversation can continue informally, and I remind you that we are back here next week for my own lab, the RAD lab, and we'll show you what we're up to. So please join us next week. Thank you.